Welcome to the Virtual Concert Hall's live show. Today I have the great pleasure of hosting a panel discussion with some of our amazing judges from the 2021 Sound Espressivo Global Competition. Our panel will talk about what it means to be judging modern competitions in our modern digital age, but we'll talk about so much more than that. So hang on tight, we're going to have a fantastic time. Hello and welcome to the Virtual Halls Concert Live Show. So I want to introduce our guests for today and ask them a few questions, and then we're going to have our discussion session. And at the end, we're going to have a Dear Young Musician segment, and it's going to be pretty amazing. Now, our first guest for tonight is called Dr. Angela Chen, and she is the founder and director of Lambda School of Music and Fine Arts. She holds a doctorate in piano performance, pedagogy and education from Concordia University, Montreal. She has an unbelievably successful music school and has unraveled the mysteries of effective and efficient learning. Her students have performed all over the world in major international piano competitions, as well as famous venues such as Carnegie Hall and the Royal Albert Hall. She is the author of the new Lambda Piano Method series, developed to help pianists progress at an accelerated rate. She has a new book called The Guide to Musicality, the Art and Science, which might be of interest to young musicians and teachers. And this book, she discusses what it means to teach musicality. And this is something that we're going to talk about today as well. She is recognized internationally as an adjudicator of major music competitions. She's a senior examiner and clinician at the Royal Conservatory of Music, and she is a pedagogical consultant to the iScore project and has lectured at Concordia University. Welcome to the show, Dr. Angela.
Hello, hi Chris. Thanks for having me.
No, it's my pleasure. So I'm going to have a quick question to start you off and also to kickstart our discussion a little later on. And so a question for you would be, as a judge of competitions, what is one of the most important aspects of performance that you look for?
I think all the competitors who prepare for a competition is definitely very fluent and takes pains to polish the technical elements already. So I think the most important part that distinguishes ourselves and brings forth our musical personality is in our musical expression. And every person has a unique way of saying something from their heart, because, well, we could play the same repertoire, but we can have infinite interpretations for this repertoire, which makes it distinguishable from one to the other. And this is a unique language that represents us, that through this music, we are speaking from ourselves to the audience. So I think a message to young musicians is that trust your instinct, be brave, bring out your message of what you understood from the music, and bring forth your voice through your music so that we can hear you. That is the most unique and the most precious part of music making. And I hope that you can enjoy that experience. It's great freedom that you can express yourself and there's no constraints. Bring it forth.
I really love that you said that, because I think that's really a competition, I think, is a practice for real life performance and what it means to perform and discover your voice. And competitions, even if you win many of them, end at some point. And if you learn to develop your unique voice, if you learn to develop what it means to be expressive at the piano, musical and an artist, then you can carry that with you for the rest of your life as you perform. That's really good advice. Thank you, Dr. Angela. The next guest is Annie Chang-Center, who is a violist and a pianist. I'm really amazed that she can play both at a very professional level. Since she's come to the US at the age of 13, Annie has performed in Europe, Asia, and the US as a soloist, chamber, and orchestral musician. She has performed as a piano soloist with some major symphonic orchestras, including the San Francisco Symphony, the Hong Kong Philharmonic, and the Cincinnati Symphony Orchestra. As a violist, she has performed at festivals such as Marlborough, Ravinia, and has collaborated with members of the Juilliard, Guarneri, and Emerson string quartets. While living in Arizona, she was the assistant principal violist of the Phoenix Symphony, the principal violist of the Phoenix Symphony Sinfonietta, and the Arizona Chamber Orchestra, for which she performed regularly as a viola soloist. She was also the pianist of the Concorda Trio with cellist Michael Center and violinist Dana Paisley. Currently, she plays with the Baltimore Chamber Orchestra. Annie is person of many talents. She also works as an arts administrator, teacher, and visual artist. And she was the marketing and artistic director for the Academy of Music Northwest for 5 years. She also writes, and she's a writer for the International Rescue Committee newsletters, and is passionate about performing in concerts to benefit organizations that provide assistance to homeless people, refugees, and victims of natural disasters. Welcome to the show, Annie. It's really nice to have you.
Thank you so much for having me here.
Oh, my pleasure. So my question for you will be, when you give immediate feedback to competitors, which is something that's really a unique part of our competition, what do you think is the most important thing, or one of the more important things for competitors to hear after they've performed?
I think constructive criticism is really crucial. They need to know first what their strengths are. I think it's always good to start with something positive. And the next thing would be what I can say, or what judges can say to help the competitor to be able to play at the next level. So it's whatever they need to work on. First, for some, and that could be many different things. For some, could be tone quality, or finding their own voice, like what Dr. Angela Chen was saying earlier. And I think finding that authenticity in yourself, in your playing, is really important. That's what will set you apart from the other competitors or other musicians. And I think it's also, it's really important to just trust, know yourself, learn about yourself, learn about what music means to you. And every note, every phrase, every composition should be personal to you in some way.
I really like that. I always think I wish I heard that advice a little earlier in my conservatory days. I think there's a tendency when you're competing or even playing in master classes, every performance, that you feel like you have to nail every note. You have to play every passage perfectly, and that it's all about not making any mistakes and being solid and a concrete artist, which is very important as well. But I think as an audience, what people really listen for is that unique voice, that artistry, that expression, and they want to hear something a little bit different that's special to you. And both of you touch upon that really well. So I'm really looking forward to our discussion about that as well, especially with Dr. Angela's book on a guide to musicality. The third guest and also moderator of our discussion session is Avgust Antonov, and he is on the advisory board for the 2021 Sound Expressiva Global Competition. He is a phenomenal pianist who has studied all over the world, from Bulgaria, France to the US, and has played with many major pianists and worked with them. He has collaborated with contemporary and amazing composers of our day, such as Carter Pan, and recorded their works. He is a judge of multiple international piano competitions all over the world, and is also the judge of our 2021 Sound Expressiva Global Competition. You can check out our interview together from Monday at our website, or also on our Facebook and YouTube page. Welcome to the show, Avgust. Thank you so much for moderating this session.
It is a pleasure to be here. Nice to see you, Chris, Annie, and Andrew. Nice to meet you guys in person.
Likewise.
Yeah,
Likewise.
It's lovely. I'm going to let you take the reins on this, because of course I'll still be here, but I wanted to talk about how, and if you have any thoughts about what Dr. Angela and Annie has said so far.
So, I think both Angela and Annie are right, and people can hear much of everything else I've said in previous interviews. One thing I'll add to that is that one thing we cannot forget is that this is a show. when we perform, we're not just performing for ourselves, we're performing for an audience. So we have, in a way, we have to create a show for the audience, whether the audience is virtual or live. So that's something that I'm always looking for in contestants, whether they can bring that spark, where I can feel or hear the spark. It's not so much about the notes, but can you get me excited about your performance? Can you get me that feeling of I want to stand up and give you a standing ovation? So that's very important to me as well, in addition to everything else we've said over the past year or so, and what Angela and Annie have said today.
I think what you're talking about is connecting with the audience, right? I think it's really important for a performer to never forget that your audience is right there, and what you're trying to convey is really to communicate with them, to connect with them, to share something that you feel so deeply about, or you want to inspire them or excite people, that kind of thing, as you mentioned.
Yeah, absolutely.
Earlier.
You're absolutely right. It's what I like to say. It's more about being entertainment. Entertainment in a pure sense of the word, like what rock stars are doing, like the Rolling Stones connection with their audience. We have to. I'm looking for that type of connection, or sometimes with performers as well.
Yeah.
And same with the contestants.
So one pianist that comes to mind as you were describing this is Yuja Wong.
Yeah.
And so, as we know, her personality is she is not shy about dressing in a way that's different from the traditional ways of how classical musicians dress. And I think that in itself, I think people have mixed opinions about it, but I think what you're talking about when it comes to the entertainment showmanship aspect of things, she has it. But I think with that, you do have to have a artistry and authenticity to back that up in the classical music world.
Oh, absolutely.
Right.
I am not going to name any names, but we own. I am not going to call anybody out, but we all know people that
Yes.
that do that that shouldn't be doing.
Right.
I'll leave it at that. It will get me in
Thank you
trouble
for that.
otherwise.
Dr. Angela, I want to see if you
Yes.
can give some practical notes on what it means to, Avgust says, put on a show or be entertaining or special. I think these are very ethereal words, and I think maybe a practical approach is really necessary.
Right. I think one wowing factor and also a good way to train ourselves is to push the envelope. To push the envelope of what you believe you're capable of delivering. Whether it's this pianist or another pianist, we got that wow factor because we feel that the elements of the human potential has been tested and they are successful in it. We can test it in many different ways by extending this envelope, and we all bring in our own personal signature, who we are as a defining characteristic to the music. But one very important element is, as a musician, we practice day in, day out. We're in this humdrum. What's important is to keep this fresh in our minds. Fresh that every time when we try to speak through this music, it has to remain a certain value that we feel is constantly developing inside, so that it doesn't go just like a pure recitation where with more practice it loses its meaning to you. Then what can you express? So it's very important to keep that spark, always continuously find in the music, seek inspiration. You can listen to even YouTube, listen to recordings, continuously discover what's in the music that makes it, revives it, gives it a sparkle, so that every time when you practice, there's a reason behind it. It's not just to make it better, but to push your own envelope, to develop and really bring justice to these magnus opus, to share it with the audience and the judges.
What would you say to so I want to turn this into a way for young musicians to make this practical, because I think it's important that we talk about pushing the envelope, but what does it mean, apart from listening to recordings of other pianists play, let's say a piece by Chopin, what are other ways do you feel, and I'll bring this to everybody to answer, that they can continue to make this fresh? How do you find inspiration? Because I personally don't think it's just at the piano. You can watch movies, go to art galleries, and incorporate examples from all over the place to really inspire you. What are your thoughts on that?
I think there are two aspects, a general one and a more concrete one. General one is enrich your knowledge of everything so that you can make connections with the music, so that you as a person develop more fully, so you have content, you have correlations, so that out of music is just a tip of the iceberg where you express yourself. But you have a wide knowledge base so that you have things to speak, you have things to talk about. But then in order to do that, I think you can do two things. First, self-critique. After, don't just practice for repetition, but critique yourself. What's the problem? How can I make it better? And also play for your fellow people, like not just your teacher. You've gotten enough feedback from your teacher, but from people that would listen to you and not just critique on you, but on a collegial basis. It may be your classmates, maybe your musical friends, because they are not looking at you from high above. They are at your level. And there is a level of sharing and mutual understanding. When you are able to learn from your peers, you're also able to learn better from your professors.
Wow, that's excellent advice. Annie, do you have anything to say about that? That's really this remarkable advice. Thank you, Dr. Angela.
My pleasure.
I want to add to that experimentation is a really good thing to do to keep things fresh. So when we look at standard repertoire, there are typical ways that everybody does in terms of interpretation. And I think it's really important to sometimes kind of take things apart a little bit and change things up a little bit. So, for instance, in terms of pacing, if everybody does the same guitar somewhere, try something a little bit different. Try different tone colors. If you have multiple voices, try rebalancing your voice. So instead of always bring out the bass and the top, change up with bring out the inner voice, can change the texture of the music. So I think there are a lot of ways to keep things fresh and just by experimenting and not be afraid to try different things. I think that sometimes can help.
I really like that. Avgust, do you have anything to add?
No, everything Angela and Annie have said is exactly on point. One thing maybe that I will add is regarding inspiration, how to find inspiration. I think listening to what the legends in the business have done is a wonderful way to get inspiration. Back in my day, I used to have a collection of every recording of Rachmaninoff concertos by every single person out there, be it Horowitz, Ashkenazi, Erwild, you name it. Entremont, I had them all. I was listening over and over to not to copy, but to just inspire myself on what they were doing. So I think that's an important aspect to do it. Another one is to record oneself and listen to oneself play it. It's not that much done nowadays, but it should done more often. Yeah.
Thank you for that. So that's really good advice. I think to summarize, and please feel free to add more if you feel like I missed anything. But I think the major advice for young musicians in a competition is, first of all, to stay fresh and make this music something that is personal. And the ways to do that is, as Dr. Angela said, to go out and be be a better person, experience more in this world, expand your horizons on what you know, and then also play for your peers and listen to yourself to reflect. And I think these are really good pieces of advice for young musicians moving forward. Now, the next part of what I want to ask all of you is, because you are all judges for this Sound and Specific Global Competition, what do you think is a major part of judging these days that is different, especially now that we're all online? What does it mean for you to be a judge now? Does it mean, and we get some criticism, or not criticism, but a suggestion that, maybe judging is a very harsh word, as though we're putting some judgment onto competitors or something of that sort. But we have to label things. We have to say, that this is better than the other. We have to say perhaps that we enjoyed this performance more than a different performance, or that this was more technically proficient than the other. Do you have any thoughts on what it means to be a judge now? I'll have Dr. Angela start, if that's all right.
Okay, sure.
Yeah.
Yes. Now, as a judge, I've adjudicated a lot of competitions, many of which were live, and then during this pandemic period, it became virtual. Specifically to this one that we're talking about, this virtual competition, I love it personally because it balances the video element as well as the live aspect. So I think I would use different parameters to judge each one. In terms of the video, first I would dismiss the recording quality, because we are not in the same playing field. Some may be recording with an iPhone, and some may be doing it in a recording studio. But I think that has no bearing on the actual performance. I would try to siphon out all the other extraneous noises and really truly listen to the performer per se. And if it is a solo, I think I would personally focus on the rapport between the performer and me as a listener, to see if he or she is really bringing forth from his heart that particular message that's very dear to him. And if it is in an ensemble, I would also judge based on the interaction between this performer with maybe the collaborative musicians around, or as an ensemble. So I have to be very careful to see who I am there to judge. Is it to judge the ensemble? Or if sometimes I have the experience of a very outstanding performer, but unfortunately the collaborative performer is not very experienced. So I wouldn't take that into account. I have to be very careful to siphon that out. Now, then when we go to the actual performance, I would treat it as a live competition. And for that, I would listen for that engaging personality, almost like a live platform. Is there the spark? Is there that engagement? And I look for that, assuming that all the technical elements are in place. But if, of course, some may not be, well, then I'll judge accordingly. Another thing I would really take into account, hopefully, is to see the age and the experience. Because if you see someone who is very young, and the kid is 5 years old, how many years could that child would have learned the piano? That I would have to judge it according to what is the expectation of such an age. So I would factor in a number of multiples just to make sure that is on a level playing field for everyone, so that is a meaningful participation.
No, really, thank you for that in-depth and detailed answer. I think it's important that all these elements are accounted for, and it makes being a judge quite difficult, because you're thinking and analyzing, you as well as trying to enjoy the music as well. Of course, you've been a judge of multiple competitions. What are your thoughts on all this?
I think, first of all, I agree with what Andrew has said, but I also think we need to stop with the being concerned about the terminology we use, because you started with that question, Chris, regarding judging. There's not two ways about it. whether it is virtual or in person, competitions are meant to be judged. It is meant for the judges to choose the best out of the field, and diminishing that aspect of it, it's not good either. Now at the same time, judges, and each judge is different, but judges have ways to also express sympathy with the participants to make them feel more welcome. But we've got to stop with playing with the words. Competition, it's about judging. It's about choosing the best in the field, however that is.
Thank you for that. And I think the kind of on the other hand, while it is a competition and you are being judged, it's important, I think, as a competitor not to take it all too personally, because these are all personal judgments, and to realize, yes, maybe so-and-so judge may not have liked my playing, but that's not a personal reflection on my own process. That like as Dr. Angela said, you play for your peers, you play for your teacher, you listen to yourself. These, I think, are really important markers of where you're at. And just because so-and-so judge may not have liked your playing, so to speak, that doesn't mean that you're a failure. That doesn't mean you shouldn't pursue piano or violin or viola.
Oh, absolutely. I say often to my students is, competitions are a weird beast, to put it mildly. Sometimes you play well, but you end up in front of a jury that has woken up on the wrong side of the bed. And is in a bad mood, or has spent 10 hours listening to however many musicians before you showed up. Judges are always impacted by whatever happens throughout the day. They woke up, they slept badly, they had a bad bed, they didn't eat breakfast, and that impacts how. So at the end of the day, competitions are a way for musicians to get a. I'm looking for the terminology, to get a feedback outside of their comfort zone. Yeah. Simple as that. It doesn't mean it doesn't mean that because they've won a competition that the best in the world. It doesn't mean that they suck if they got the last place. It's just feedback that they can use to improve themselves. Simple as that.
Yeah, I always think about it as a way to improve yourself. Exactly, that's exactly it. Like it's a way to just put pressure on yourself to improve, get your playing to a certain level, and then just that's it. Annie, I would love to
before Annie jumps in, one thing we talked about, Chris, last time, is that we put ourselves that pressure because we want to show up for a fellow musician from the same university or the same class. We want to show up to them, show them that we're the best. So we put ourselves that pressure as well.
Yeah, there's a competition. It's a competition because we want to compete, and we do want to be better. And it's not a bad thing to want to be better. I think that's our human pursuit. Annie, do you have any thoughts on this? And I'd love to hear in our pre-chat before we entered this broadcast. Annie, you mentioned something that really struck me, that playing the viola actually helped you become a better pianist or informed your piano playing. And we're talking with Dr. Angela about becoming more human, acquiring more knowledge. Do you have any thoughts on that and what we've said so far?
I do. I have thoughts with many different topics that's related to this one right now. But before I get into any of that, I wanted to share a line that two great pianists have said the same thing. And what these two pianists said is, competing is like going to 7-Eleven buying a lottery ticket. I don't know if you can guess who said it or if you have heard it,
Yeah, I've heard it. Yeah.
Emmanuel Axe is one of them, and Gary Golson is the other one. So
Yeah.
I think they're, and they both have won international competitions, so they're experienced. So there's a lot to say about that line. I think all competitors, especially the younger ones, when they're just starting out, they need to understand to not be attached to the outcome. Even if you win, you don't want to say, okay, I'm the best, I'm done, I'm done playing. You have to always think about what can I do to be better next time, whether you win or not. And for those who, okay, let me come back to your question. I don't want to stray away.
Yeah, no, go ahead. Yeah.
So in terms of being a pianist, I think for a lot of pianists, if you can learn another instrument, orchestral instrument, I think it can be incredibly helpful in understanding the piano playing and the repertoire from a whole different perspective. You can hear piano music in a more orchestral way, and that's going to change the way, it's going to shift the way you listen for voices, for different lines, and for different textures. So I think in terms of that's very helpful. And of course, as an orchestral musician, there's the social aspect of things as well, because we get to play in small ensembles, we get to play in an orchestra, and playing in, for pianists, I think it's very important that you play in some kind of small ensemble. So you learn how to connect with others through music, through your own instrument. So.
Oh, thank you for that. Yeah. Oh no, I definitely agree. And I wish I started learning the violin at a young age, but my parents thought that I should be even more well-rounded, and so I had to pick up different sports and other things, and so I couldn't continue with the violin. But I can understand how, if you were to play other instruments, how, and that's why some pianists go into conducting as well. Like they get a bigger sense of what the world that the composers themselves are listening to are a part of.
Yeah, I actually like what Annie was saying, because we as pianists, and as you know it, Chris, we are so alone on stage. Usually we're alone, except with orchestra. But even then, we lead the orchestra, and so playing chamber music, being part of an ensemble, be it orchestral ensemble or wind symphony, or whatever, or doing conducting classes, that gives another perspective on a whole business, on a whole on the whole side of things. It gives another perspective on what the other people hear. It gives a perspective on everything that is being done on stage, and I think that's something that we need to have more of.
Thank you for that. And I want to bring my question back to Annie for a quick second, and I want to ask, in terms of playing, we talked about keeping it fresh, and one thing about playing with an orchestra is you're kind of at the whim of the conductor. You're not a soloist. You're part of an ensemble, and you're not the star. And as pianists, I think usually we get used to the idea that maybe we're kind of a star. Even when we're collaborating, we want to be the star. We want to make our solo come out even nicer. Can you talk a little bit about what it is to be a violist in an orchestral setting, but also in a chamber setting, and how has that informed your musicality and your musicianship?
I'm actually a very shy person, so
okay,
the orchestra life, being a violist was perfect for me because I just fit in. I'm very good at that. So to try to keep it fresh, I think that was your question. As an orchestral player, as full-time symphony players have to play the same program at least 3 or 4 times, sometimes more. And if we're doing educational concerts, I have done the same program 10 times in the same week. So how do you keep that is a lot. How do you keep that fresh? And I have played in certain scenarios where I was actually the soloist, as a viola soloist, and every concert I would think of something a little bit different to focus on, and it always comes back to music. Everything comes back to music. So I try to listen to a different part, or try to think about my line a little bit differently, try to think how my line interacts with the orchestra. So every concert I just pick one thing that's different from what I was focusing on before. So that's kind of my trick. And when I'm sitting in the orchestra, let's say we're doing Mahler Symphony, which is, the symphonic works are amazing. And they're so complex that even if I have to play the same concert 5 times, there are always different things that you would discover if you pay attention to it. Like sometimes for me, it's listening to a really beautiful oboe solo or flute solo or the horns. There are plenty of things you can focus on, even if you're not so comfortable or happy with the directions that you're given in a moment. Because being a violist, you're pretty down in a totem pole, so you have to listen to quite a few people above you.
You get very little say on how anything goes.
A lot of times, you just kind of keep your mouth shut and say, okay, I'll make the best of this.
Yeah, it sounds like what you're saying is it's a very internal game. It's in your mindset and in your psychologically how you think about things. And it's an attitude thing too, which I really like. It's not just I'm so bored. It's like, what can I do to listen to this differently? Dr. Angela, in your teaching with students and in your Lambda school, I want to ask, how are you teaching students to do that? Because a lot of the time they're playing the same repertoire for multiple occasions or competitions. How are you getting them to be inspired and have that spark when they perform, the same Chopin scherzo for the, 15th time or something like that?
It's very true that in a live performance, that I find what's special is through a live performance, we get the energy from the audience. That is constantly in flux. And for every performance, we play for a different audience, hopefully. Even if it is the same audience, they'll give us a different vibe. And that freshness we can take from the audience. And in my teaching, I'm very fortunate because in my school, I have a full-size concert hall with a 200 seating capacity.
That's
so
incredible.
What
Wow.
I like is that my students, they play in open rehearsals. So in their lessons, they play in the concert hall. So they know about the acoustics, all those things to make adjustments for, and the lesson takes place in the concert hall. The next step is when they are ready to perform, we invite their classmates or just any parent that are floating by, they can just come in and watch. So that gives them the vibes of playing and trying out their repertoire to an unknown audience, even at the phase of development. It doesn't have to be fully formed, but that gives you the feedback internally to see, it doesn't work. Because, just when I'm practicing or even when I'm having my lessons is okay, just someone walked in, I couldn't do it. Where is it? Why did that happen? What is the trigger that led me to become distracted? They can learn from this experience. And I find it extremely helpful because of this kind of training. And after that, I like to push the envelope to even a more crazy degree. Sometimes I would set them up with a lot of distractions. And when they are prepared, they can overcome those distractions. Some audience making noise or even turning off all the lights. And once, I did something by, banging a door, and they kept going. So I said, that means you're pretty solid, meaning that you are really into the music. I heard a story that I want to share with you is about a concert pianist. That was a long time ago. I was told by the piano builder because they offered their new piano on stage and the pianist was playing and suddenly somehow it was on full stick. The stick collapsed and boom, like that. And the piano's damaged. The pianist doesn't even move, just continue. The audience was flabbergasted, not only because of what happened, that the piano was damaged, but he just continued as if there's nothing. that close bond between the musician and the music, in honor of the audience, that I'm not going to give up no matter what, is that spirit, is that essence of being a real musician, that you engage in it so fully and you're not going to let go. So I think that is a very important part of training, that you can play for your peers, you can set up situations. I don't recommend anyone suddenly dropping the lid, okay?
Yeah.
But yeah, that's a bit too much. But
a
if
bit
you
too much.
prepare for the conditions, you are
Yeah.
able to live up to it and take the challenge.
That reminds me of something I witnessed, actually. This is Yo-Yo Ma, who can play under any kind of situation. And at one point, his chair was falling off the platform. He just half stood up, and then he eventually just played through the rest of the concert standing, half standing. Didn't miss a beat, didn't miss a note. It was really incredible to watch. And I'm sure that's probably not the only incident he had encountered, but that shows that's the dedication that I think
Absolutely.
Dr. Angela was talking about.
This is something that ties into what Avgust was saying too, with about it being a show. That you don't stop the show. The show keeps going on, and I really love both stories that you shared, Angela and Annie. This is a way to get people to and students to rehearse the art of performing, not because necessarily that they want to be performers for the rest of their lives, but this is an art. This is a kind of art that you can learn, and through your hall, which is a fantastic idea of banging doors. I've heard teachers, they'll start, banging the thing, or I have a teacher who would eat sometimes during a lesson, and so they'll this is good, and you hear them eating, and it's distracting, and you're like, well, what? But you just keep playing, you keep going, and you know that he's listening, like he's definitely listening. But it's really just fascinating to see how slowly we can develop the experience of being a performer that's not phased by anything that happens, coughing, people leaving, anything that happens. Of course, do you have anything to add?
No, those are great stories. I mean, it's the good old days of training performers, where we would do whatever it takes to be ready, at whatever cost. It's. But I like what Angela was saying as well about that connection with the audience, and it comes back to what we're talking about on Monday, with the fact that although virtual is here to stay, it's never going to replace the live connection with the audience. And both stories, especially Annie's story by Yo-Yo Ma, it's also a connection with the audience, because when as an audience you see the artist struggle, whether it is with memory or with the setting, in the case of a chair or the piano that falls down, that connects even further with the audience. That you continue through that, you're guaranteed to have a standing ovation. You have that connection, and that will and that will never be replaced by. Exactly. I had a bit of the same experience about 4 years ago. I was playing William Bolcom, the piano rags, and I was playing with the music, and my stand fell down in the middle of the snake, the famous snake where the pianists have to tap with the feet and sing with the tongue. And I continued playing because, again, it's that connection. So it's a very similar story. So it comes back to live audience, to the connection with live audience, which will never be replaced, whatever we do.
I think it's these are really good stories. One of my favorite things to watch on YouTube is Midori at a very young age, when I think she was playing with Leonard Bernstein. Her string broke in the middle of a concerto, and so she just unfazed handed her broken string violin to the concertmaster, took his, kept playing. That string broke too, and then went to the assistant concertmaster and kept going. And I think Leonard Bernstein just gave her a huge hug and a kiss afterwards. Like, how do someone at such a young age do that? And I think it's a combination of experience, but also really good teaching. And I want to focus a little bit on this right now because all of you are teachers, and I want to ask, how do you feel, for teachers who are listening, what would you say to teachers about preparing their students for competitions? What are some tools or tricks you've had or you do with your students to make sure that they feel comfortable with competing? We mentioned mindset. We mentioned the attitude and way to approach a competition, that it doesn't define you, that you just do it to better yourself. I want to start with Dr. Angela. How do you approach it with your students?
Well, I teach my students that performance, or playing an instrument for that matter, is a discipline. A discipline means that it requires constant commitment and a level of seriousness in what you put into. And after that, you reap what you sow. And accordingly, when they put their discipline, they grow and become stronger. They do not give up because of outside obstacles. They stick to the commitment. And also, when there is that self-involvement, they will continue to grow and be better. So it's very important. That's the first thing. Without that, nothing can be born out of it. With the discipline, you're going to emerge and continue to grow. The next thing is, earlier I said, you need to expand your boundaries. But by expanding that, you have to be really prepared. Now, my teacher's teacher, one of my teachers, her name is Nancy Liu from Hong Kong. And her teacher was Adele Marcus from Juilliard. She told me the story about when she was young and she went to Juilliard. And it was on a cold morning where her teacher asked her to go for her lesson at 6 a.m. So she had to take the metro and go through all that. When she got back to Juilliard, her hands were frozen, completely frozen. And her teacher asked her to play immediately, no warming up. And she managed. And the teacher, Adele Marcus, said, I want you to be 500% prepared so that in the worst of circumstances, you're still able to deliver. It's not that you have to be in prime state. You work in that, but you have the best reserve. You're training for that. That's why I'm saying it's a discipline. Mm-hmm. If you're 500% prepared, even at tremendous degradation, you're down to 100%, where generally the norm expects that as perfection. So you can always deliver by being overly prepared. So chance favors the prepared mind. You always get a lot more ready, and that's part of the discipline and also part of the professional ethics that I instill in the students. It's not just learning for the sake of just having fun alone. You get the fun, you get the achievement and the glory after that when you can over-prepare and deliver no matter what. So I make sure that I instill this value in my students. And the second part is that, well, I understand that you want to win in a competition, and having that gung-ho attitude is good. But in case you win, keep yourself in check. It doesn't mean that it's glorious, then now you can be full of yourself, because that is the next challenge. When you are acknowledged and you don't get out of yourself feeling that you're big, you're no longer maintaining the humility to carry on. This could be your demise. So I keep them in check. So that's what I do to my students.
It sounds like you're an incredible teacher, but also a coach. I see this a lot of in the sports disciplines, that you over prepare, you go through all different kinds of training to make sure that on the actual competition day you can perform, and it's difficult and it's pressured, but you know you can manage it. And I think this is something, wow, it's really good advice. Thank you for that, Dr. Angela.
Thank you.
Annie, do you have anything that you'd like to say about preparing teachers and what would you say to teachers who might be preparing their students? Myself, I'm a teacher too, but I'm not nearly as experienced as any of you. So what would you say to people like this?
Well, first, we have to think about the physical part of things, the intellectual part of learning music, and the mental part of learning music and performing, preparing to perform or to compete. Practicing mindfully is very important. A lot of students, when they first learn anything, or once they have learned the notes, it's very easy for them just kind of go into the automatic pilot, just run things, mindlessly. And I think that's when a teacher can step in and say, okay, let's take a step back. Are you fixing anything as you were playing through? Are you understanding the music? Did you study the score? What does this mean? Do you know the historical background of the piece? What do you think the composer would do if he or she were playing this music? I think to shift the way a student think and connect with music and the way they play can change their overall playing in the preparation. And another really important thing is consistency. And there are many ways of preparing for that. One is, I find visualization actually very helpful. So it's very beneficial for students to practice, actually run through a whole program just in their mind. I don't know if students or performers, I believe a lot of performers do that, because you have to have a very clear mental image of what it's going to be like when you're on stage, what it's going to be like while you're going through this musical journey where you're playing the program. What is that sensation like? What's going on, with your fingers? How is that going to work with a particular shift for a string player or a run for a pianist, that kind of thing. I find that kind of thinking repetition very helpful, actually, with very difficult spots. So there are times if my students are struggling with one particular technical thing, I would just tell them, put the instrument away, close your eyes, visualize how you would do it, how you would do that jump or how you would do that shift. And a lot of times when they come back to the instruments, they can do it. Yeah. So much of it is amazing. Up here. And it's also creating a zone. The athletes talk about that all the time. If it takes practice to figure out how to do that, how to create a zone that nothing can disturb you. So to have that is going to help you to be consistent, because you're not going to be affected by what's going to happen around you. Because a lot of things happen when you have to, right before you play or perform or compete. A lot of things can happen. And if you can just keep yourself in that zone, then you can handle anything. And one more thing I want to talk about in terms of being consistent is, this might sound a little cruel, but I actually went through it myself. I did it myself. Is getting up at any time and run the hardest thing, that you have to play. Or even if you're sick, you're not feeling well, you don't feel like playing, just make yourself get up and do it. And if you can still play at a certain level when you're feeling terrible, then you're going to play that much better in a normal situation. So that's my advice.
That's such good advice. Thank you. I want to bring up to any of you, Dr. Angela and Avgust, to comment on that. There's so much there.
Yeah, no, it's funny. It's funny because Annie was saying exactly what was running through my head right now, because everything is so about the head. It's about concentration, thinking, the zone, like you said. One thing that in breathing, lots of breathing. But everything Annie was saying about preparation is exactly right. As a matter of fact, I think we may have read the same book, you and me, Annie. There is a book out there, the composer, written by Michael Colgrass, American composer, Pulitzer Prize winner. He passed away a few years back. He wrote a book called Lessons with Kumi. and he does give exercises, mental exercises, preparation, how to focus, how to breathe, how to run through mentally, exercises, how to prepare for a speech, how to prepare for a high intensity event. And so what you're saying, Annie, reminded me of that right away, because that's exactly the way of doing it. So yeah, no, that yeah. I'm rambling, but yeah, it was
No,
great
that's
hearing that from
good.
Annie.
Thank you. Dr. Angela, do you have anything you want to comment on all this? Yeah.
I like very much what Annie offered about developing that zone. And I suggest to young musicians a way in their practice that can help them solidify this, which is very tangible. You know, for us human beings, we have the five senses: the visual, the auditory, the sense of touch, kinesthetic, and the taste and smell. Well, that doesn't quite apply to music, but we can use the other senses. For example, when they are learning, they can remember a few things: how it looks like on the topography of the instrument, how it feels to the hands and to the body as one entirety, how it sounds. Sometimes you can just close your eyes without the visual element and link by hearing and the kinesthetics, so that you remove the visual disturbance, so you can be more connected. So you can play with a combination of these sensory modalities. Sometimes you bring in all, sometimes you concentrate on one of them, sometimes you combine two and remove the other one. By doing that, it helps you find a new perspective of how you integrate with the music. There are certain parts, like as Annie mentioned too earlier, they go through the habitual pattern of mindless repetition. So how do we prevent them from being mindless? We give them a very specific goal, but that goal is internally driven. Like, how does it feel to your hand? You have to feel it. How does it look? There's something very, very tangible. It's the visual element. How does the path go? How does the body feel? How does the sound go in relation? So that you can have multiple channels seamlessly integrated to form a very secure memory. And I think the kids also enjoy it a lot, because they feel like it's a game, and we can start doing that at a very young age. They find so much fun, and after a while they grow on their own and they're able to apply this. Just like this kind of phenomenon, like in psychology they call it synesthesia, which is when they have all the senses combined. Like Scriabin, when he hears a sound, he can see a color. Well, that is that kind of extreme sensory connection. Or like Chopin says, he can feel with his fingers, he can feel the sounds. This is in a very similar way, but we can create these intermodal connections at an early age, and that gives it fun and gives it a purpose for them to discover in their practice. So I find it could be very meaningful and very useful to make it more engaging and more interesting for young students to try that.
Wow, I love that. I think it's the melding of the senses is so important, because you're always within the five senses. There's no period of time when you don't have all five senses at the same time. I mean, given that you're not blind or deaf or have these other disabilities. And so to practice without engaging these senses is almost to be not human for a little while. And that's, I think, what the mindlessness comes from, when you're not engaged. And so what you're saying is actually you're making practice really fun, because you're engaging your senses. And it's harder work. It's a lot more harder work. You can't just play through something and be done. You have to really engage with it. I think that's really important. Is there anything else either of you, any three of you would like to add to what Dr. Angela just shared?
I just want to say, with engaging other sensories, what that's going to do, the outcome of it in the performance is that's everything is going to come from inside when you do that. It's no longer just playing what's on the page, and that's what's going to go out to the audience. That's what the audience will see and hear and feel with you, because whatever you project, that's what people are going to reflect as well.
Yeah.
Connect and reflect.
Absolutely. Because the audience also isn't just listening to you with their eyes closed, or they may be, but a lot of time they're also seeing you. And if it's a live performance, they're feeling your presence. And there's a lot of things like even the way you breathe, like Avgust talks about breathing and that cueing. There's so much you can tell by how someone breathes. One of my professors in Montreal would say, I know what the sound is going to be like when they play, just by seeing how they prepare for the motion, and just by seeing the gesture, just by seeing how their elbows move, seeing how they breathe, I know what sound's going to come out of the piano. And if it's a harsh sound, I know before they play it's going to be a bad sound. And there's a lot of visual intrinsically tied into that. Is there anything else that you'd like to add, Avgust?
No, everything was nothing to add on this.
No, it's fantastic. This has been such a fascinating conversation. I want to veer us into what I really admire about all three of you, which is the way you've developed your careers. And I think this might be very useful for a lot of young musicians, teachers, and other colleagues about how you've developed your careers. For example, with Dr. Angela, forming in your school, and then really diving into pedagogical and writing, with, Annie, you doing all these different performances and with orchestra, and just developing all sides, and your writing as well. You're an arts administrator. So I'd like to dive into this a little bit, because I think this fascinates me personally, and I think will be of much value. So I guess my question will be, more centered on myself, if you don't mind. So I'm going to ask you first, Annie, if you were just graduating from college now and, you want to have a career of some sort, what are ways in which you feel like people should either discern what they want to do or get started? And what do you think it takes, especially now in our digital modern age, to kind of get started, get yourself known, but also not sell yourself short? There's a tendency also to feel like, no, I can't do that. I could never find my own business. I'll just stick to what I know. Do you have any ideas or thoughts of that? Yeah.
I think having an open mind is incredibly important. You don't want to say, okay, I want to do this and only stick with that one thing, because we live at a time where so many things are changing and shifting with the pandemic happening. The way we live our lives are really different now, and going forward, I think some of the major changes will continue, and it will evolve into something different. As a musician, of course, everyone wants to perform, but even that in itself, where do you want to perform? How do you want to perform? Do you want to be a soloist? Do you want to be a chamber musician or orchestral musician? You want to know what your options are first, and then visualize where you think you might fit and work towards it, but don't lock yourself with just that one thought. Okay, I'm going to be just the chamber musician. Then you might miss out opportunities on other things, or if you say, okay, all I'm going to do is I'm just going to do everything online and not think about other possibilities. People think differently, and I think it's important to just kind of keep your mind open and don't even rule out learning a different skill. I know a lot of young musicians are learning coding and creating apps, and it's a great thing for musicians because some of them are creating apps for theory training or different types of things that beginner musicians can use to learn, some kind of education tool. So by picking up a new skill, sometimes can help you with your career as a musician. So that would be my advice.
That's great. No, that's really yeah, that's really great advice. Dr. Angela, I want to talk, would you mind sharing in this I feel like there's a tendency in the past perhaps to specialize and say, oh, I'm just this. And I think, Annie, you mentioned that, no, we should stay open. Can you share a little bit about your journey, on not specializing, realizing, no, I can do so many other things and I want to do these things. And I would argue you've done these things exceptionally well. Can you share a bit of your story on how you launched into all this?
Well, there's a lot of background. I didn't start as a musician. I started from the medical field. And after completing my medical training, actually, I feel that it's not for me. And out of my love, I go for music. That is by personal choice to give up what I did previously. But my previous training gave me the foundation of how to think and approach from a more scientific perspective, while I had the good fortune of studying with very excellent mentors that introduced me to music. And from a later age where I have the maturity to integrate what I learned in the scientific field. Now, looking back into even further than my existence, think of Leonardo da Vinci. He, as the Renaissance man, combined arts and science since the early days of our modern civilization. We as artists are not solely artists, but also scientists. If you can fuse those two disciplines, and it's not limited to the both, there are many out there now. If we are able to fuse that and find an angle that you can find a niche for yourself, that is the best way for yourself, because it's important to know your strengths, but also to know your weaknesses. To know those weaknesses is where you need to replenish the insight from certain disciplines, because now is the technology is increasing at an exponential rate, where the chips get outdated and ever so fast in a few months. And we can't be outdated. We are the ones who create those chips. We have to maintain our relevance to the world. So that's why we have to be the ones to be in flux, and we have to learn. Most often, a pitfall that I've seen in musicians is they really pigeonhole themselves as only a musician. I am only a musician. This should be turned around, and that I am a musician, which means I have learned all the basics, from the discipline to the confidence to the presentation and everything else, that I have now the wherewithal to assimilate that and apply everything else that I'm interested and bring it into the equation and live it out to bring the best that you can. You can be a musician and many other things to make you a better person to contribute. So I think don't limit yourself. As Annie said, don't ever call yourself anything. You're not just a something profession. You can be combined, and the combinations are infinite. So just look out ahead, see what it is possible, because not everyone is destined to be only a musician. You all deserve more. That's how I think.
Wow. Well, one of the benefits of this job right now is I get to talk to people who speak so eloquently about this and really inspire me. So thank you for that. That's really exceptional. Avgust, you're someone who definitely embodies a lot of this Renaissance thinking. We mentioned last time you also love gaming and incorporate that into your thinking a lot. Do you have anything that you'd like to say about developing a career and making sure you embody a lot more than just I'm just going to stick to this one thing?
No, everything that Annie and Andrew have said is great, and we've talked much about it on Monday, last Monday. One thing I think I would say to myself, if I was 20 years old, or I would say to upcoming musicians, is believe in yourself. Believe in what you want to do, and believe in your qualities. I think that's very important, because we all get people that put us down. Especially talking about college kids, about university type level kids, we all get put down by our peers. We all get put down because of failures and whatnot. I think it's very important to believe in what you want to accomplish and in your goals. That belief is I think, is one of the most important one out there. After that, expanding the horizons of your horizon is very important as well. We talked earlier about how pianists are, in our case, pianists being all alone on stage or in a practice room. So expanding that knowledge by playing chamber music, by conducting classes, playing instrumental, other instruments, be it percussion or strings or whatever, that adds as well. But no, definitely believe in yourself, believe in what you want to do, believe in your own capabilities.
Wow, we really like that. I want to, first of all, thank you so much to everyone so far who has contributed such great wisdom and knowledge. I want to kind of end with something that I think is quite important, especially for everyone. And I think this is something all of you embody really well. And is that one must take the time to really get to know themselves. If you're going to develop a career, if you're going to perform, you have to know yourself. Even with, I think, choosing repertoire for competitions or for performances, you have to get to know what you play well and what you really enjoy playing. And so knowing yourself is really important. And then it also then facilitates what you do in the future. If you know that you're really passionate about this certain thing, then you'll make the necessary steps to go pursue that. And you know that deep down, no matter what people say, you believe in that because you've really examined it within yourself. So my last question would be, and we'll go, probably start with Dr. Angela first. What would you say, we'll do it two ways. We'll do it either, what have you done to really reflect and get to know yourself? Or you can go answer this question where, what would you recommend for others in order to get to know yourself better and what you can contribute to the world? Because like you said, Dr. Andrew, we're called to do a lot more than just play, an instrument. We're called to do so much more.
Okay. Well, for me, I was like a little particle that's bouncing everywhere until I somehow found my niche. And much of my life was haphazard, but I fall on the good fortune of having good mentors at a certain time where I have the maturity. So I see it as like 90% luck, and the rest is perseverance and a lot of hard work. And I think that's absolutely necessary. And I think what's important is that when you embark in music or you feel that you're a musician, it's not exclusive, meaning more than that, is everyone can learn music. Music gives us a very good foundation to apply to subsequent career paths. Now think of that, considering normally we all learn music at around 6 and we go into university. How many years have we studied music? 15, 16 years? In order to be a good musician to graduate out of university, we have spent from 6 years old to 23 countless hours of studying music. That's a lot more combined than a medical doctor. What does that tell you? You have put in a lot of effort. You have put in your discipline. That shows that you are capable. Now, that has already given you the sustenance to tell you you're able to stem from here to anywhere. And it doesn't mean that when you study music or you take a competition that you must only exclusively be a musician. You can be in any career path that you can develop yourself. In addition to that, you can be a musician for life. And that is something that goes with you forever. One thing I don't like to see in young people is they feel that once they've achieved a goal, then it's done. Everything is completed. There's no need for continuation, whether it's achieving a certain level of examinations or competitions or graduating from school. Does it mean that completion of these apparent artificial milestones mean that that's the end of it? If it is, then you've misunderstood the whole process of why you gotten there.
Yeah, absolutely.
So it's very important from the beginning to see that and apply your discipline to any other field that you want because you've gotten the background. So that's very important. And remember, you can be a professional musician in parallel to your career for life. And I find that I know many professionals, they play better than other professional musicians that I've heard. That is not mutually exclusive. Keep going. And we need more of your efforts so that you can express yourself and in parallel track, do whatever other discipline that you are cut out for.
Thank you for sharing that. I think what's really beautiful is that you chose music. And so in choosing music, you realize that other people can continue to choose music and it can be something for life. I think that's such a beautiful sentiment because, yeah, you're right. It doesn't end. A musician's life doesn't end. And that's why you have teachers who never retire. That's why you have musicians who play till they're 90, to the day they die, and conductors who even have died on the podium because they just continue to do what they love and it's a part of who they are. I love that. Annie, I would love to bring you on the stage to talk about this and either comment on what Dr. Angela said or to how have you gotten to know yourself better and in doing so form what you're doing now.
Well, I first agree with everybody. Music is a lifetime pursuit, and it's such a beautiful thing to have in life for anybody, professional or not. And I actually take that on as a responsibility to share music and to introduce music to less underprivileged children, because it all comes down to opportunities, right? A lot of some of the children, they don't even know that you can learn music or to have a certain understanding for music until it's introduced to them. So I think it's important when we can that we try to reach out to those who do not have the opportunity to even know about the beauty of music. So that's the first thing I want to say. And then in terms of myself, how I got to know myself was it was a very challenging time what I went through. So I had the opposite life experience as Dr. Angela Chen. I started performing when I was 6 years old, and that was pretty much my life. That's all I knew. I didn't know anything else. And so I just kept on that path, performing piano, picked up viola when I was 10, and I was, kind of doing both all the way through college, and then became a full-time symphony musician. And then I became injured to the point where I tried to go back to playing first after 1 month, after 2, after 6 months, and my body just, I just couldn't do it. And finally, I was at a point where I had to make a decision on, do I want to just keep doing physical therapy and try and come back to playing music, or do I want to just try something else? And at one point, I decided that why not learn something else? Because there's so much in life. Music is not it. And in fact, one of the questions you posted, Chris, was what will you tell your 20-year-old self? For me, that would be there's life outside of the practice room. Because I was doing double major. I was practicing 6 hours a day on each one, which equates to 12 hours a day.
It's a lot, yeah.
It is a lot, but I was performing on both instruments, and even just by learning the rep, it would require that much practicing and to try to keep grow technically and musically. You're musicians, you know what I'm talking about. So anyway, when I stopped playing, it was very difficult at first because I did not know who I am. I only knew myself as a musician, and when I could not play music, I suddenly was left very vulnerable, and I feel like the world has stopped. I don't know how to go on. I don't know what else I can do. I don't even know who I am, And so in a way, that was a blessing in disguise, because that forced stop made me look at the world from a whole different perspective, and it opened up the horizon for me to have more time to learn about different things in life, which I think is incredibly important. And when I started playing again, which was about 4 years ago or so, it was a very difficult journey, because I was working with a different body. Even my hand does not open the same way as I did. So I had to retrain myself on both instruments, and that was a journey in itself. Wow. So just by going through life, I think that's why my emphasis is always about keeping an open mind and don't pigeonhole yourself into just one thing, because life happens. Life is unpredictable, and you have to find a resilience to face whatever comes your way and make the best of it.
Thank you so much for sharing such a personal story and your personal journey. It's very inspiring, but also it's relatable to a lot of people, because they do get injured, and it is from overworking your body, and it happens. And this is really inspiring to hear that there are other things to do. You just want to keep your mind open. Avgust, I'm going to turn to you. Do you have any final remarks on getting to know yourself, or anything that Annie and Angela have shared? This is incredible. This has been such an incredible conversation.
Getting to know myself. It's a process. I think we all go through that process, especially when we hit tough times in our lives. Whether those tough times are injuries like Annie, or tough times being personal or financial, whatever. For me, I had a moment, and we talked about it last Monday. The moment for me was in 2008. After I left Texas Christian University, where I had to make a decision what type of repertoire and concert pianist I would be. Would I stick to the traditional and deal with the critics? I'm sorry. Or would I go towards something completely unknown? Mm-hmm. So that was a bit of a soul-searching there. Another soul-searching moment was when I had to make a decision whether I would come back to France or not. Mm-hmm. In 2019, because it was time. So those were two important moments for me as far as soul-searching. But I've always been a performer. I will remain a performer no matter what. But at the same time, I do have other activities on the side, that allow me to kind of take a breather. Video games, chess, judging competitions.
Wrestling.
Well, right now I don't wrestle. No, thank you. No. But no, I definitely, getting to know myself was part of the growing process of what I'm at today. So yeah.
That's great. No, thank you so much to all three of you for sharing. This is just personally very curious of me to get to know your journeys, so that it's a way for me to figure out how I could go on my own journey. But I think it's also very useful and helpful to a lot of people who, especially with COVID-19, the pandemic, how do you navigate all this? How, on one hand, it could be very debilitating, but on the other hand, if you find the time to really discover and take the lockdown and everything to discover what you're really about and what's happening to you and what you can offer to the world, it can be a really helpful time to figure this out. So I want to thank all three of you for sharing your personal journey and for all your advice. All three of our judges are exceptional musicians, but also very inspiring to me. They're also our judges for the 2021 Sound Specific Global Competition. So for everyone listening, I really encourage you to apply for this competition. The website's below. What's really important about this competition is that you get to talk to these judges. You get feedback right away after you play, and a lot of the time it's really what you want. You want that affirmation. You want some sort of feedback to see whether it worked or not. And sometimes a lot of competitions don't give you that feedback, or they give it to you much later. So we pride ourselves in this competition with being able to give it right away. So you get to hear what the judges think of your playing. We have no time limits for any of the semifinals and the finalists. We have no repertoire requirements. So you can play anything you want. And that's a big ask, and it's a wide range for us to listen to. But we want to encourage you to discover your unique voice, which is something we also talked about today. And through repertoire, through discovering it, through trying it out and performing it, you actually figure out whether this resonates with you or not. We also have over $100,000 US of value in prizes with performance opportunities from seminars, scholarships, festivals, graphics design, website designs, or in a way our mission to fulfill our mission of empowering musicians to find their own careers, to build their own careers, to forge what they have ahead of them, and to discover your unique voice and contribute to the world. And the fifth thing is that it's all live. And so just like this, in our conversation, it's all live. You play live. It's all broadcasted live. We don't do recordings for the semifinals and finals. So you have to play live. And it's a very amazing thing to do it online, but you have people hearing you right away. So if you're interested and you know somebody's interested, please apply. We are accepting applications until November 30th. And with that, I want to thank our guests again, Avgust, Annie, Dr. Angela Chen. It's been such a pleasure. Thank you for being such great guests.
Thank you so much for having us.
Thank you. And with that, we'll see you soon. We're broadcast running almost every day on virtual concert halls, and so we hope to see you again soon. Thank you, everybody. And we also want to thank our Sound Espressivo directors. We have Fedor and Ante today. These are people behind the scenes who make this whole production work, do tech checks and everything. And you'll get to meet these people if you apply and join us on the virtual stage. So we want to thank History of Music as well for supporting us, and for Virtual Concert Halls for hosting all this. So with that, thank you again, and see you next time. Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
No matter where you are or who you are, music connects us all. We started with a dream, but now we are paving the future. Welcome to the Sound Espressivo Global Competition. Fully virtual, yet bringing musicians closer together than ever before, now on a global scale. True live, inclusivity, diversity, connection, community, an extraordinary array of judges. Get noticed by companies all over the world. Prizes, scholarships, performance opportunities. Apply to be a part of the most exciting congregation of artists like nothing you've ever seen before. We guarantee quality and leave no musician behind. We can't wait to hear you on the virtual stage.